Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our college football predictions with week 13, aka the penultimate week. Last week I went 23 and 4, total season record 194 and 71. It was one of my best weeks recording, and this is the week I actually kind of like. Most of the big teams they're playing non-conference opponents for some reason, SEC, but I feel like I have a lot fewer games to work on, and I'll take the few when I could get them. But let's jump right in. Starting off well Friday night with Florida State taking on NC State. FSU getting a win over Virginia Tech, and NC State losing to Miami pretty badly. They're giving Florida State 4.5 in this one. But with State being at home and knowing that what they pulled off a couple earlier this month, anything can happen. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and take Florida State to win this game and get to bowl eligibility. Yeah, it's hard to bet against the number one team in the country. Next, we got the Missouri Tigers taking on the Oklahoma Sooners in a former Big 12 rivalry matchup. Yeah, I didn't know both these teams played in the Big 12 back in the day. Missouri coming off a win over Mississippi State where they ran the ball pretty well, and Oklahoma coming off a victory over Alabama. And I would call that an upset, but and even though Oklahoma is lesser of Alabama in terms of quality play, I don't think they're that far off. But back to this prediction, I do sense a bit of a letdown game for Oklahoma. They're coming off that big victory over Alabama. They feel like they're on top of the world, but I could see them falling apart in the next two games. But at home against Missouri, it's hard for me to go against that. I'm gonna roll with the Sooners to win this game. And then we have the Miami Hurricanes taking on the Virginia Tech Hokies. Miami, another blowout win over NC State. Over NC State, yes. While Virginia Tech lost to Florida State, and now they're out of bowl play. But the big news for Virginia Tech, they announced that James Franklin is finalizing a deal to become their next head coach. Obviously, he won't be coaching this game, but it's an interesting hire. One I actually kind of like. So this one, Miami's favorite by almost double digits. I'm gonna go ahead and take the Miami Hurricanes to win this game. Next, we have a pretty big ACC matchup between the Louisville Cardinals and the SMU Mustangs. And both these teams are coming off a bye week. Well, Louisville, at least, they're coming off of an embarrassing home loss to Clemson, which pretty much put them out of playoff play and put them out of the ACC title hunt. Well, SMU, they're still in the hunt. They just need a couple. They just need some help. And with this game being played in Dallas, I gotta go with SMU to win this one. But I think this one's gonna be a really good battle. And then we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers taking on the Northwestern Wildcats. Minnesota, yeah, they got blown out by Oregon, but I'm not going to blame them too much. Oregon is on another level with them. And Northwestern, they had a good fight against Michigan. Unfortunately, they lost on a last second field goal. And with this game being played in Wrigley Field, probably the final game for them to be played on Wrigley Field, as their new stadium will be likely completed before next season. I do think the Northwestern fans will come out with a little pride. And given how they played against Michigan, I'm gonna go with Northwestern to win this game. Only because Minnesota's too inconsistent, and I think they're like 6-5. One more win, they'll be 7-5, which will be their destiny. And now we got the Kansas Jayhawks taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. And both of these teams are coming off of bye weeks. But Kansas is coming off a loss to Arizona. And Iowa State, I can't remember what they did off their bye week. But I digress. This game will be played in Iowa State, home matchup. I am going to lean towards the Cyclones to win this game. This is another one that actually could go in any direction. We'll have to wait and see. And then we have Baylor taking on Arizona. Baylor got blown out by Utah at home. Meanwhile, Arizona picked up a huge road victory over Cincinnati, putting a big dent in their playoff hopes. And with this game being played in Arizona and Baylor being very, very inconsistent, I gotta go with Arizona to win this game. What else I was gonna pick? And now we have the Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the Texas Longhorns. Arkansas once again losing another close battle, this time to LSU. I mean, I know they're out of bowl play, but they just can't find a way to win a game. They'll be taking on Texas, where they're coming off a big road blowout loss to Georgia. Georgia is starting to warm up a bit, so I do have my eyes on that. With this game being played in Texas, I'm gonna go ahead and take. I'm gonna go ahead and take the Longhorns in this one. But I do think Arkansas will try and give it a fight. Now we have Kentucky taking on Vanderbilt. Kentucky coming off a loss against a non-conference opponent, which is pretty irrelevant. And Vanderbilt, they had a bye week last week, but last time we saw them, they lost to Texas. Wait, no, they lost to Auburn. When they know they beat Auburn, then now this will be their final home game of the season for them. And for Vanderbilt, yeah, it's hard for me to go against this team. Did a little engine that could. Who knows what their playoff hopes lie with the next week or two? I think next week's going to be very important for them. And now we have the Michigan State Spartans taking on the Iowa Cyclones. Michigan State out of bowl play, losing to Penn State, and Iowa kind of blew a lead against USC. And in this one, yeah, I'm gonna go with Iowa. They're on a two-game losing streak, but I think they're gonna rebound. Michigan State's just not a good football team. And then we have a basketball duel between the Duke Blue Devils and the North Carolina Tar Heels. Both of these teams come off of pretty embarrassing losses. On one hand, with Duke, don't let that score fool you. They didn't even try against Virginia as they got blown out at home. And now everyone can shut up about them making the ACC title game as a four-loss school. Yes, I know, I fell for it too. They'll be taking on their in-state rivals, the North Carolina Tar Heels, who are coming off a loss against in-state foe Wake Forest, where the team did not score a single touchdown. Wake scored 4 touchdowns. North Carolina only scored 4 field goals, and they had 2 field goals blocked. Yes, I attended that game, and it was pretty miserable to watch. And normally, even though Duke is favored, it's just not in my heart to pick them. I think Carolina, if they come out, play good defense, I think they could upset Duke. No, it's not because of my bias against that school, but I actually do think Carolina can upset Duke and bring the victory bell back home where it belongs. Following that, we got the Kansas State Cyclones taking on Utah Utes. Kansas State, a low scoring victory over the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And they'll be taking on the Utah Utes, where they put up 55 points on the road at Baylor. And their Big 12 title hopes, they're still alive for now. Been looking at this game. Utah isn't favored that much. I think Utah wins big over Kansas State. Now we got the Michigan Wolverines taking on the Maryland Terrapins. Michigan is coming off a last second victory over Northwestern. Maryland losers of 6 straight. And in this game, I'll be brief, it's going to be 7 straight. And Michigan will get the win. And Maryland's coach is likely going to be fired after this. Now we have TCU taking on Houston. And both of these teams, well, for TCU, they're coming off a loss to Baylor. Again, I'm not going to blame them too much for it. There's no shame in losing to BYU. While Houston, can't recall what they did last week. I think they had a bye week. So this one, it's in-state robbery. I think this one can go in any direction. I really do. And you know what? I know Houston's favorite. I'm going to go upset. I'm taking TCU to win this game on the road. They're going to beat Houston. And yeah, let's move on to the next game. I wish I would have never said that because we got two trash teams in the Oklahoma State Cowboys taking on the UCF Knights. Both teams are no longer bowl eligible. In fact, they're bowl ineligible. And yeah, probably 5 people will be at this game. UCF, you win. You're double-digit favorites at home despite not being a good football team. Y'all win. Move on. Then we have probably one of the most important ACC matchups of the season. You got the Pitt Panthers taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Pitt's coming off a blowout loss to Notre Dame. Again, I'm not going to blame them too much for it. Notre Dame was Notre Dame. And Georgia Tech, yeah, they had to fight and claw and get a victory over Boston College. That in its own statement is kind of embarrassing. Yeah, things have not looked right for them ever since they lost to NC State. I know they came off a bye week, but boy, did they look rusty. And the reason why I said this game is pretty important in the ACC because if Georgia Tech wins, I think they're heading to Charlotte, regardless what happens next week. We all know next week they got the Bulldogs. But this game, if Georgia Tech wins, they're going to the ACC title game. I'm pretty sure that's the scenario with that. And with Georgia Tech being at home, and what will be technically not their last home game. Granted, the next week game against Georgia is technically a Georgia Tech home game, but they're playing at the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. I think that crowd's going to make an impact. I'm going to go ahead and take Georgia Tech to win this game. They're going to get back to what they do best, running the ball, and Haynes King, well, running the ball. Nebraska, Penn State. Nebraska's coming off a bye week, but they had a pretty impressive victory last time we saw them against UCLA. Meanwhile, Penn State ended their losing streak getting a win over Michigan State. It was about time they got a victory, but if you watch Penn State, they have been playing better than what that record indicated outside of a game or two. And with this game being at home, probably the final home game of the season, if I'm correct, I'm gonna take Penn State to win this game, and next week we'll determine if they could go bowling. Now we got Tennessee taking on the Florida Gators. Tennessee's coming off a win over, I think they play New Mexico State. Okay, who cares? And the Florida Gators is coming off a loss to Ole Miss. They are now officially bowl ineligible for the season. This game, yeah, Tennessee at night is normally not a good combination, especially when Kirk Herbstreit and the big game team is calling this game. However, Florida, I do think they have a little pride, and I know they like to spoil Tennessee's playoff hopes and make the squid cry. Oh, this one's actually a tough game to pick. I've gone back and I'm actually going back and forth with this one more than you think because I have not been impressed with Tennessee this year. They should be way better. Well, Florida, they should be way better too. This is a tough game to pick. I'm just going to go ahead and lean towards Tennessee for now, but I don't know. I'm not that confident in that pick. Big Ten matchup, Illinois and Wisconsin. Illinois, well, I don't know what these two teams did, but I know Wisconsin got blown out by Indiana, just like, well, everyone else this season. Illinois, I think, is coming off a bye week, but the last time we saw them, they beat Rutgers. But for Illinois, I'm going to go ahead and give them the win here. But hey, last time Wisconsin was at home, they were able to upset. I'm not ruling an upset out the table in this one. All I'm saying. Then we have a rivalry matchup between Cal and Stanford. I think both teams are coming off a bye. And for California, yeah, let's go ahead and give them a win. I'm just breezing past this one. Now, Arizona State will be taking on Colorado. Colorado's coming off a bye week, but they're now bowl ineligible. Meanwhile, Arizona State, they're coming off a victory. I can't remember who they beat, but they won. And with this, even though, and since I've jumped off the Colorado bandwagon, I'm going to go ahead and take Arizona State to win this game. Is it going to help them with their playoff hopes? Absolutely not. But they could dream. And then we have what was intended to be my game of the week this week, but since Cincinnati had to lose, I had to detour. And that is BYU taking on Cincinnati. BYU's coming off a bounce back blowout win over TCU at night. And Cincinnati got lost to Arizona at home, which put a huge dent in their playoff hopes. And this game actually can go in any direction. I expect this to be one of the top games of the week. I'm probably gonna lean towards BYU for now. I think they got more to play for. In Cincinnati, your playoff hopes will be done after this week. And then our after dark game of the week, Washington will be taking on UCLA. And UCLA, they lost to Ohio State. We know this. And Washington did pick up a bounce back win over Purdue, which is not hard to do. And in this matchup, yeah, I'm going to go Washington to win this one. Double digit favorites, even though they're on the road. And I think, if I'm correct, this might be UCLA's, either this game or the next game, this might be UCLA's last home game in the Rose Bowl, as I got word that they're moving to SoFi Stadium, and I know they're having a legal battle fighting that. So we'll have to wait and see about that. And finally, our game of the week. We have USC Trojans taking on the Oregon Ducks. USC is coming from a come from behind victory over Iowa, and Oregon look like they're back on track, getting a win over Minnesota. Granted, it was Minnesota, but Oregon finally looks back to normal. And this is the first time Game Day's been on a spot this season twice. It's their second trip there. Just hope they find someone other than Sabrina Ionescu to make the Game Day's picks. But this matchup is huge because whoever wins is going to have that upper hand on that playoff spot, even if they're probably not going to make the Big Ten title game. Which I do think is still in play for both teams. They're just going to need a lot of help doing so. And in this one, I'm just going to go with the home team, Oregon, to win this game. I do like their offense. I do expect this one to be, again, another top game of the week. And yeah, that wraps up the college football predictions for week 13. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Gamble safely, and I'll see you next time.